We are one shy of a quorum, but we're gonna get going here, and we're Jenna, you look inquisitive. I'm pretty sure it's 8, unless you remember differently.
I think you're correct. I can double check.
That's because I thought it was 7, but
You're being optimistic.
We've kind of gotten back and forth between 7 and 8.
Well, yeah, with changing representation, it's fluctuated. So let me double check in the background.
We can get going, and I can present on things, and
Yes.
we can have discussion. So we'll skip the minutes till a little later, or if we get confirmed that we're 7, not 8. So just as a prelude, we have a whole bunch of stuff to review and approve in the next few months. We've got the targets for today that go into the STIP update, which will be next month. We've got the CMAQ projects that the deadline is today that folks are applying for, and we'll be doing the air quality analyses, so we'll have to review that. And then the 10-year plan projects, we're anticipating getting together with DOT in the next week or so to review their review of our projects, and then we'll have to vote on those by March, end of March, or deadline for that. So jam-packed, bunch of stuff to do. So hopefully we'll get a little break in the spring. So not holding my breath. So target setting for today. We have targets for highway safety. That's all public roads, and then our public transit provider, federally funded one, as well as UNH in a couple of cases. We will be doing updated targets for highway conditions and bridge conditions, but that's going to be in June-ish. DOT just updated their targets, and we have the clock started on our target setting. So that's a whole new situation. So I provided target information and a memo in the packet follow along. But just as a recap, we as an MPO follow and work with the states on a transportation planning approach that is performance-based using data that we all share. And so we're analyzing real data about the system, as real as we can get, and set targets based on a set of performance measures in each performance area. So those targets get integrated into our metro plan, into our transportation planning documents, and then projects are prioritized using those measures and targets and data to achieve those targets is kind of the approach. It's not clean all the time, but we're using real data to make decisions is essentially the gist. So we set targets annually for highway safety. These are the measures. I'm sorry, I'm not sharing my screen for folks on Zoom. Like I said, back to the game since November. Can folks on Zoom see my screen now?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. Sorry about that. I remember at least before halfway through my presentation. So there are a few measures for highway safety involving crashes that result in fatalities and serious injuries, including ones for non-motorized users. The number of fatalities, it is surprising how variable from year to year the number of serious and fatal crashes is. So we use a 5-year rolling average to kind of smooth the curve so you can see the actual number and the 5-year rolling average there. 2020 was weird because there was a temporary dip in the number of people out on the roads, but we didn't have a dip in the number of crashes resulting in fatalities, which was strange. So just to preface all of this, we're recommending that we support the state targets. That doesn't mean that we're accepting the statewide number for this region. Our region is approximately 12% of the fatalities at the state. So that's just sort of a general benchmark for our region. The rate of fatalities is based on the number of fatalities that occur per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. Our region, for some reason, is weird, where the VMT is lower relative to the state, and so it looks like there's a higher number of fatalities. So it doesn't really make mathematical sense to set a benchmark for the region, because it's strange.
What's our percentage of the state's population?
That number, I don't know off the top of my head. If someone knows it before me, they're welcome to jump in. I may be able to get that for you.
I'll grab it.
Why do you ask?
Well, one way to compare the state is by miles traveled, but another way would be by population. If we had 12% of the fatalities, but however many percent of the population. And it's another way to compare.
Yeah, that would be interesting. How would you?
Because if we have less vehicle miles traveled, I'd be curious on, what is our mode share for transportation comparatively?
And
how might that affect safety, or people driving shorter distances on average here, or longer distances? There's a lot of different ways that the comparisons could be.
Yeah, and there's some regions that support traffic that doesn't stop in the region. There's a region somewhere else, and then a destination outside of the region. Our area has that kind of traffic more than some other areas, I think. So
Yeah, that's a good thought, because we can get general numbers on how many people are living in the region and driving out of it, living and working within the region, and how many folks are coming from outside the region.
Also be curious about the age makeup of the region versus other parts of the state, and if that has any correlation to that. There's all kinds of analysis with different combinations here.
I think we're fairly equivalent with the rest of the state in terms of the age makeup.
We have a large university, which has a lot of younger people, but many of them might not be driving much.
I think.
Statistically, younger people tend to.
Yeah, there's a bit of a curve where the crashes accelerate and then they dip down, and then once you over 65, 70, it goes back up again. So that's a good thought. Serious injuries, I won't get into the gruesome details, but they are clearly defined. How they are reported in the field is pretty variable. Someone can say, my head hurts, and it could potentially be, and they get taken to the hospital in an ambulance because we want to avoid someone having a concussion and passing out in their car as they drive home from the crash site. That could be reported as a serious injury, and the police officers are having to make a call in the field. So I'm not putting anything on them. The data we get on fatal crashes comes straight from a federal database. That is all very clearly laid out, and the data are very accurate because the reporting level is much more stringent. The serious injury data, we get those, sorry about the chat. Okay, thank you, Jen. The serious injury data are there's a lot of variability, especially in the location, because we get those. It's kind of a fun game of telephone. They come from the municipal police departments to the state, through 2 state agencies, and eventually to us. So some of the locations will just be New Hampshire 16 or Route 4 within Northwood, for instance. But that isn't enough information to make any kind of planning on where that happened. So we're still working on that. The state has a new database, and police officers are getting more and better technology as we go along, but that tends to depend on whether you live in a large urban community or are out in the boonies, whether your police department can afford GPS units that go in the new cruiser. So, thank you, Rachel. 11% of the state's population. And so you can see where the VMT is lower relative to population, the number of crashes. So
So we
that's
drive a little less in this region, which makes sense because things are closer together than like in the North Country.
Yeah.
But no big correlation to the population.
Yeah. So still some stats analysis we could do there on that, on the level of driving. So similar issues for the rate of serious injuries. But in general, these two categories have been dropping pretty substantially if you look over decades. Vehicles have become safer. People haven't necessarily, but overall, with promotional campaigns and automatic braking and seatbelts and things, if people are wearing them in New Hampshire, seatbelts help. The number of crashes that result in serious injuries are going down. For non-motorized, this is obviously a big issue because folks outside their vehicles are not protected by anything. Again, with the reporting inconsistencies, we have had to go digging for crashes in the past we know happened, but weren't recorded as a bicycle or pedestrian crash. So that's just something we know to look for. We tend to hear about crashes first in the newspaper, and then we know what to look for in the data to make sure that it pops up. But again, you can see where in the next update cycle, we're going to be losing 2016 from that 5-year rolling average, and that's going to bring our level down. So that's just something we look for where there could be a high year in the future that skews that up, but we hope to keep it going down. Number of motorcycle fatalities is a supplemental measure. We kind of track this because motorcycles are more prevalent in New Hampshire. And you can see the kind of cyclical nature there, where even with that horrible crash up in the Conway area, weirdly, there were fewer crashes overall separate from that, so the number stayed down. And then the very next year, we had quite a few. So this is so there were only 4 in the region, thankfully, but still, New Hampshire and the MPO followed the zero tolerance for fatalities on public roads. 0 is the only acceptable number. That being said, this is a lot to look at, but if you take a look at the far right column, darn it, these are the targets for the state, and I don't know what happened to my table, but it's not showing the SRPC numbers. But so these are the statewide targets for fatalities, the rate of fatalities, serious injuries, and the rate of serious injuries, and then non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. NHDOT does not support a rising target. So in a case where there were more crashes than the previous year, a DOT tends to set a flat target, so that we're, just morally, it doesn't make sense to accept more fatal crashes than the previous year. And basically, we're going to be working with DOT to conduct road safety audits. That's a reactive thing, but highly effective in tackling roads and intersections where there have been a lot of crashes. We are still waiting to hear back, but we applied for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. That would be a region-wide planning effort to identify specific locations to be more proactive. There are a lot more details in the data snapshot, so take a look at that on the data issues and the trends over time. And then we can do lots of regional analyses like we were talking about with, okay, so we have a lower BMT, but how and where are people driving? And is that relevant to addressing the number of crashes? There are lots of specific types of intersections we can, like a T intersection is a lot better than a Y-shaped intersection for visual reasons, and all kinds of analyses we can do for the future. Any questions on the safety targets? Again, this is not meant to be manipulative, but my friend asked me the other day if I thought my son was ever going to have a driver's license. And I thought that was an interesting question, given that it's 15 years from now, and there are autonomous vehicles delivering pizza out in California, and Teslas can mostly drive themselves. I don't know if I would feel comfortable letting it drive me down the highway at 80 miles an hour.
Pizzas don't die.
But pizzas don't die. And I am not very confident in the tech sector that moves fast and breaks things. So just a little.
He's super cute.
A little levity there when we're talking about public highways and crash issues. He loved driving around the block, just in the passenger seat, going real slow. That's Oliver, for people who don't know, my little friend. So the proposed action that we cannot vote on currently is to recommend that the MPO board or the policy committee adopt the highway safety performance targets that DOT set and that SRPC support those in all of our efforts.
And if we were in a meeting, at some point, we would have to recommend one to the policy committee.
Correct. Any questions on the highway safety targets before I move on to public transit targets? Right. Steve, did you ask a question? Were you muted maybe? Okay, sorry. Obviously, this is a top priority for SRPC moving forward, and there are things we can do about it. So the other targets are for transit assets, the vehicles and facilities. So vehicle condition and facilities condition. So the federal approach uses a useful life benchmark. So that's the average number of years in a specific vehicle. The average number of years till that vehicle usually reaches a 2.5 condition rating out of 5. I don't know the details on that, but you can imagine as your car gets older, things wear out, and so as a vehicle that carries members of the public, there are specific things that get keep track of so that those vehicles are in good condition. Those are separated into rolling stock. That's the buses that carry people that pay fares or are not staff of Coast. And then there's equipment. Those are pickup trucks and vans and things that don't carry fare paying passengers. If that's an accurate way to put it, more or less.
Yeah, equipment would be like forklifts
Right.
or scissor lift, but they have to be worth more than just $25,000. There's a dollar threshold
Okay.
under which it's not.
Okay. We'll push scooter.
Yeah, in some things they count non-revenue vehicles as rolling stock, and in some things they don't. It kind of depends on what
Okay. That's helpful.
aspect of the regulation you're looking for. Yes.
I nailed that right down.
All right, so I should have put some pictures in here, but you can imagine a bus carrying people versus a forklift or a pickup truck that just carries sand and salt for putting around the parking lot. And revenue generating vehicle being the key phrase there. So these are just some examples of the useful life benchmarks that we use. There are those the federal defaults. So a bus being, if you have a picture of a bus in your head, that's the 30 to 35-foot buses. The cutaway buses being the smaller ones that have the door being the cutaway part. Just some other fun ones. The inclined plane vehicle, that's like the cog railway. So the ones that are literally in the cogs that chug up a hill. And they have ones in steeper cities around. And then a vintage trolley like from San Francisco. Apparently those are expected to last 58 years. I don't know if they just have really like fewer parts or something, but and the useful life benchmark doesn't mean that Coast or UNH have to get rid of that bus after 14 years. They can go for longer than that. It's a benchmark. So going through the data here, so we're looking at the measure is the number of vehicles in the fleet that have reached or exceeded their useful life benchmark. So you can see the UNH fleet and Coast fleet there. In the three main categories, there were more categories before, but I was using the wrong categories apparently last time we set targets. So they generally fall into these categories. We don't have any inclined plane vehicles in Coast's fleet, where there are two vans. So the van category being, those might be demand response vehicles that pick someone up at their house and take them to a medical appointment. 0 of those vans in the UNH fleet have met or exceeded their useful life benchmark. Coast has 8 of them, and only 1 has met or exceeded its useful life benchmark. So the baseline being 10% of vehicles in both fleets combined have reached or exceeded their useful life benchmark. So that's kind of how the calculation goes. So I made and these data are from both, I got them both from UNH and Coast in late November-ish. And it's entirely possible that they're out of date already because the vehicles are constantly kind of coming and going. For instance, I think both Coast and UNH are expecting new vehicles within the next year. So the targets, the assumption of the target is how many vehicles will be at or beyond their useful life benchmark in 2023. We'll reach that year. So just looking at that, this is not incorporating anything about maintenance or vehicle replacements necessarily. This is just a snapshot in time. So 20% of vans in both fleets will be at or beyond their useful life benchmarks in 2023. We'll reach that. So that's how I calculated those. Does that make sense? Any questions? There isn't any more guidance other than that for me. And obviously I'm not the one ordering and maintaining the vehicles. So there's no penalty for the MPO if there is one more van out of its useful life benchmark in 2023.
And I'll say that with cutaways and buses, we do tend to find that the useful life benchmark is fairly accurate. They get pretty tired past that point. But with vans, I think the federal useful life benchmark is 5 years, and we typically can get a good 7 to 9 out of one.
Yeah.
So there's no point to replace it at 5.
Yeah.
And so you'll regularly see those kind of have a percentage cycle through it. We're not even trying to replace a van this year. We have no plans to replace one this year, even though there's one technically past that line. It's in great condition. So it's kind of one way in which these numbers don't always directly reflect reality.
Yeah, and Beverly, in the Excel you sent me, there were some notes about, you swap out an older engine for a newer one, but that doesn't raise the ULB according to the federal folks. So Yeah, the bus has, I mean, what's the average mileage that you put on a bus by the end of its life?
We do about 500,000. Which is what they're designed for. They're the ones we get are 12-year or 500,000 mile vehicles, whichever it hits first. Technically means it's then fully depreciated in the eyes of the FTA and can be replaced. We don't have to replace it.
I was gonna comment that the old useful life benchmark for buses was 12. It upped it to 14.
So equipment, similar calculation. You can see the baseline at the top there. These vehicles just are older and they're not carrying people. So there's not a whole lot of sense, I think, similar to what Michael was saying, in replacing a pickup truck that runs great and doesn't have holes in the floor and the brakes are good and all that stuff. If all it does is carry stuff to bus stops like salt or however that gets done. Or plowing snow out of the parking lot. And so the expecting a few more vehicles in the equipment fleet to be at or beyond their useful life benchmark by 23. So 100% of them will hit that mark. Facilities, again, the out of 5 category scale here. I'm sorry, there's another chat. Just making sure. Oh, thank you, Steve. That is a good question. I'm looking at the Excel and the expected kind of end of life. It was just in the year 2023. I don't have that much specificity whether it's at the end of the year. So if folks want, I can make that more specific and say by the end of 2023.
We do fiscal year.
It's fiscal year.
We're
Okay.
on 7.
We have ours in October,
Okay.
which is
Right.
the first month of our fiscal year.
Okay. So I will add some more detail on that, Steve, and I'll also reach out to, I don't see Leah from FTA here, but I'll see if there's any kind of guidance on what I should do. So good call. Yeah, so this federal fiscal year 23. Okay, cool. So facilities, you have passenger facilities. Bus stops, I believe, do not count in the passenger vehicle. So that's a train station would be a fast passenger facility, but Coast and Wildcat don't own and operate those. Administrative building, an office building, you can imagine, maintenance facilities like a garage, and then parking lots. So the facilities for Coast and Wildcat are all in good shape. The only one I believe that's out is the parking lot, Coast's parking lot. And Coast is making really good progress on like a full bore facilities update with a new admin, a parking structure for the buses that's covered, which makes it's really nice in the wintertime when you don't have to scrape snow off the top of them to get them rolling. And a new administrative and maintenance facility as well. So we expect a big change, hopefully in the next handful of years on that. But again, the measure is facilities that are not in a state of good repair, i.e. 3.0 or better on that facilities rating scale. So the parking lot being the outlier, but UNH has, you've got your natural gas fueling facilities and various things that are in good shape. Buildings, thankfully, tend to depreciate slower than vehicles in the eyes of the FTA. So, any questions on that?
Do you happen to know if they're planning it to be a solar covering roof? Just off the top of your head.
I think
For Coast?
Yeah.
Coast.
We're not shooting for any certifications, but it is intended to be an efficient facility.
Okay, it's just a huge space. Yeah, cool.
But there's things that are being put into it to try to make it as economical as possible. The storage facility is intended to have solar panels that will power much of the facility. So there's a number of things like that, but not pursuing certification. And I would also not be quite so generous with the facility good condition label that you said for Coast's building.
I mean, it's got a few good years on it, but it's still good. Certainly, people are looking forward to a larger modern space.
It will not collapse tomorrow.
Okay. So this is just a compilation of all that, where you can see the baseline and the projected target for 2023. I'll look up the more details on that, whether we go with by the end of fiscal year 2023, or if I'm required to use federal fiscal year or calendar year. I haven't seen any guidance on that, so I'll make sure. Last questions on that? Anything that was inconsistent or unclear? Right. So again, if we had a quorum, supporting those targets, that's consistent. Last thing that's pretty quick, transit safety. So these only apply to Coast in this case, tracking incidents on buses that are in operation that result in fatalities or injuries, or safety events, or system reliability being if there is a major mechanical failure. I assume that means the bus can't operate on the road in the middle of its route due to something major breaking down, like an engine or.
Yeah, it cannot continue its service because of a safety related breakdown.
Yeah.
So there's a specific definition in the National Transit Database for major mechanical failures, other mechanical failures, or something that doesn't count as a mechanical failure. And so it would be ones that hit the major mechanical.
But I have to imagine there's a lot of gray area where if it's raining and a wiper doesn't work, that
Yeah.
could be a safety
The
related
definitions aren't real short. Like
Yeah.
the guidance we give to our staff on trying to categorize things is a paragraph because there are some gray areas. But generally speaking, if the vehicle does not continue service because of a mechanical reason, then we have to determine whether it could have, and it was just removed based on agency policy, or whether it was unsafe to or incapable.
complicated. But with all that said, Coast has an extremely good record, especially on the really important stuff like fatalities and injuries, and system reliability being, I can't say whether these numbers are good. They feel good, but you know.
It's not a useful way to present information, but it's the way FTA tells us to present it. But that, yeah, average miles between major mechanical failure is what that system reliability represents. There's something wrong with the headings with 2021 performances. I can go back and check to see where the error came from.
Okay.
And what they should be labeled as. But
This kind of stood out to me as a pretty substantial change between the two. I don't know if it's a heading issue and just the difference between demand response and fixed route was
so
interesting.
in that year, we had 0. So that is simply the number of revenue miles we drove that year in that mode. So with the numbers where they are, the difference between 0 and 2, 3, 4 breakdowns in a year sways the numbers that much, because it's just that number divided by the number of breakdowns. So in the prior year, I think it looks like we probably had 4, and then in the next year we had none, and so that makes a big difference in how that divides out.
And I suspect the fixed route buses have overall a much higher number of hours in operation than the demand response vehicles.
Much higher hours and miles, and they are more prone to failure. The biggest cause of our failure, I think it's like 18% of all mechanical issues we have on them are diesel exhaust system failures, which is all the emissions controls to try to make the emissions safer.
Okay.
The buses that before they had that were much more reliable. Now with those new controls, they break a lot, and they kind of automatically shut the bus down or restrict its speed or something based on that. And so they're very finicky. It's the number one reason why buses get pulled out of service. And it adds a lot of expense. But they make them exhaust cleaner.
We do.
Also not bad, I guess.
All right. Thank you, Jen. Yeah, I forgot about, so it requirements based on how many municipalities have appointments. So,
We can vote.
we can vote on everything.
Yay.
And I think that was the end of my presentation. No cute pictures of Oliver in a bus. Haven't taken him on the bus yet. I'm just,
I love it.
I'm gonna do that very soon. So, questions on the transit targets in general, before we go back up to the top of the list? All right. So, why don't we start from the beginning and go back to the minutes?
Even with that false number of 216,000 that last table, you're under the target. You put those three numbers together and you divide by 3, somewhere around 96 or 97,000. Even with the false table.
Do you think that that fiscal year 2021, instead of performance, the first one should be target? Because it matches better with the 2022 target. One has data and one has just empty numbers.
That makes sense, and I could have been sausage fingering it, and it could have said target at some point, so I'll go back and look what you said.
I'm just thinking.
Follow up.
And I don't know if the error might have come from me.
We'll figure it out.
So we're gonna move back to the minutes. Recognizing that we actually did convene the meeting at 9:04. And that, when we take a look at your minutes, I think it's 3 pages in. This was the joint policy and TAC meeting that we had. Let's see. So after everybody takes a look at them, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve minutes.
And we have a motion from Mike to approve the minutes of
And we're just approving the TAC
November 4th.
portion. How does that work with the joint meeting?
You have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second.
But that's a good question, since it was a joint meeting.
And I brought it up.
I suppose the TAC and policy will both have to approve them, so we'll do the same thing at our policy meeting, and if there's some sort of snafu, we'll figure it out from there.
You're correct, Colin. Both entities will vote on the minutes as their own set of minutes.
They'll only be officially approved after the policy meeting if they vote in to approve them. Okay, cool. So,
Just a quick comment on the minutes. This is Steve Pesci. On page 6, under Durham Point Road, actually, under New Hampshire Route 155A Main Mass, the second sentence, that's really in reference to Durham Point Road. So it's, I think, something, it got moved to the wrong section. So how would the group propose funding Durham Point Road? It is not a federal road. That really should be up in the Durham Point Road discussion.
okay, good catch. I'll fix that.
Okay.
Then I'll adjust my motion approval of minutes with that correction.
All right.
And I'll second that correction.
All right. Are we ready to vote on this?
Yep.
All right, looks that way. So I will start, we'll go around here and then we'll go to Zoom land. So my vote is yes.
Yes.
Can you just say who we are for that? People taking minutes?
Sure, yeah, it says we didn't do introductions. So when we go this way, I'll take a look at who's online.
I'm on Pollock stuff. Sorry.
So Bruce votes
Bruce
yes.
Booker says yes.
Okay, We'll just go with
Lindsay Butler, yes.
Jen Casper, yes.
Michael Williams, yes.
Beverly Gray, yes.
Michelle Mears, yes. Vanessa Price, yes.
And I'll do my best here. Ken? Ken Dickey?
I approve.
Steve?
Bev's already voted on our behalf for UNH's behalf, so that's fine. Yes.
And Donna?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
And Jessica?
Yes.
I think that is every voting member.
Colin, did you get April?
Good morning, April, yes.
Thank you. You got UNH.
Good. So now we move on to another action item. This is what we just went over. It's the performance target setting for highway safety.
And just to review, the proposed action being Stratford MPO is proposing to support the state targets. And so the action is to recommend that the policy committee adopt those targets and MPO support.
So moved.
We have a motion to recommend that the Stratford MPO Policy Committee adopt the highway safety performance targets as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mike, there's a second. Discussion? Anyone in Zoom land? Raise your hand. Seeing no one, I guess we'll call the question. I'm going to start again. Bruce Woodruff, aye. Or yes?
Lindsay Butler, yes.
Jen Casper, yes.
Michael Williams, yes.
Beverly Gray, yes.
Michelle Mears, yes. Vanessa Price, yes.
Ken?
Aye.
Steve?
Bev's already voted. I'm good.
Yeah, oh, dang it. Shannon?
Aye.
I still sense such a John. Thanks for inviting me.
No, dude, thanks.
Donna, did you hear me?
You say Donna, then I.
No, I say,
What's happening? April?
Yes.
Kim?
See somebody.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of such a thing? I think I saw your eyes light up when I asked it.
Jessica?
Yes.
Okay.
Good. I think now we're on transit safety and assets.
Yes.
We have it up on the board. There we go. There it is.
So, where was my main thing? Sorry. Oh, sorry, I said the answer. So again, I'll follow up and get some more detail on the what counts as 2023, whether that's federal fiscal year or calendar year. But the assumption being buses, vehicles, and facilities that are in a state of in good condition or have fallen out of good condition or have met or exceeded their useful life benchmark.
Colin, will we need to also vote on the safety measure targets, or is that just informational purposes?
That is an action item for me.
Can they be combined?
I don't see why not. They're both transit.
I'll make a motion to accept the transit safety and asset targets.
Nice. I'll second that one.
Very good. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on this motion? Hearing none. We call a vote on this. Again, I will start. Bruce Woodruff, yes.
Lindsay Butler, yes.
Katrin Casper, yes.
Michael Williams, yes.
Beverly Curry, yes. Michelle Mears, yes. Vanessa Price, yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Shannon,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
April? April,
Oh, sorry, yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Last call, Jessica?
Yes.
Okay, did I miss that?
She said yes.
Okay, cool. All right, good to go on the action items. And we just have a couple of discussion items left.
Yes.
I have one more thing to present. While I'm getting things set up, I'll mention, as I was already mentioned, the STIP update. That's the 4-year program of projects that the state and NHDOT and the FPOs are all in the process of updating. The public comment period is going to start on the 17th next week, and then we'll have a public hearing and so forth at the TAC meeting and then the public hearing and policy meeting. So I'll be sending that out in the next couple of days before the public comment period starts. I think it's 99.99% ready. One last edit and typo check. Nothing surprising or shattering in it. It's just projects moving forward. So it will include for the first time the 10-year plan projects from the previous round. So the Milton and Barrington projects and Rochester projects, just the PE is already in there. So I made it just getting an early start. Straight here. The only other discussion item is our unified planning work program. Please excuse me while I get to it while I'm talking. For state fiscal years 24 and 25. So we are shortly going to have a meeting with DOT on this to get the ball really rolling, but Jen and I have been drafting the document. Just making sure everyone can see that. That's cool. So the Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWUP, as we affectionately call it, is a 2-year work program, a contract essentially that we go through with DOT that incorporates all of our transportation-related planning activities over the next 2 years. These are big contracts. They go through governor and council, so we will have to wait for that process, and that just gets incorporated into it. But wanted to give you a highlight of some of the anticipated changes or updates. So this is a pretty big contract, as I said. It is the substantial portion of SRPC's overall budget. It's a lot of work that a lot of people do over 2 years. You can see the previous or the still current one that goes through the end of June. Thanks, Shannon. Goes through the end of June. Our new UPWP will start on July 1, 2023. This is a federal program, so it's 80-20. The 20% gets split up between 10% match from dues, and DOT provides 10% in toll credits. And we're grateful for that because that is a big chunk. Too many things to click on. We are anticipating a substantial increase in the federal funds for the next UPWP, which allows us to do some really cool stuff that I'll talk about. And we're gonna be ironing out those details with DOT. So the total funds I just left as TBD because we have to work that out. But that's an additional $266,000. So hoping to hire some new people and do some new cool stuff that I'll talk about. The UPWP is guided by planning factors that are federal, and then there are state emphasis areas that I wanted to touch on briefly. The planning framework, this is at the beginning of the legal framework in the Code of Federal Regulations, talks about planning factors. There are 10 of them. I'm not going to read them, but they are all encompassing of the things that affect the transportation and the ways the transportation affects people's lives and the environment. So we are considering and incorporating all of these things in our planning efforts. So the UPWP is inclusive of those in the work we do.
I do have
Yes.
an odd question. You look at all these things about promoting and emphasizing, and increasing and supporting. I can follow what those terms mean. I have a little bit of a problem with what enhance means and what it entails. The next number's whatever, it's the last one.
And then the one in the middle there, it's integration and connectivity of the transportation system. So
Yeah.
these,
There's a couple.
since, I'm curious, I've always been curious of the history of all of these CFRs start with in general at the beginning of the laws. So it is not meant to be prescriptive. I think that's the best answer I can give, where
That's good.
it is up to the individual regions and agencies to determine what enhances travel and tourism. And an example being folks in Massachusetts, a lot more of them have electric vehicles and there's a lot more electric vehicle charging. But if you don't have a Tesla with 400 miles of range, you can't get all the way to North Conway. So if we don't have electric vehicle chargers, those folks are maybe going south instead of north. So tourism being an important part of the economy in New Hampshire, if we can allow more people to get through the entire state and charge up along the way or at critical points, that we can say, hey, feds, we did this, it enhances travel and tourism. Yeah. So just what I'm saying.
That's a good example.
You're right, it is meant to be general. These are not shalls. It is MPOs shall use these planning factors, but then it gets broad and interpretive.
Good.
A couple of new things to consideration in terms of the generalness and specificity. A specific one being MPOs must use 2.5% of the PL funds being the UPWP budget, essentially, on alternative modes, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian. I would have to do the calculation, but I'm pretty sure just my participation on the coast and transit boards is well over 2.5%. We spent a lot of time on our active transportation plan, and that's going to be a big part of it. So we already meet that requirement. Housing coordination is a new thing, and I think a valuable one, where there's a lot of money in the state for new housing, but if it doesn't incorporate transit considerations, like if you're building low income, but it's out in the middle of nowhere and there's not a bus stop, that's an issue. So doing more to connect housing and transportation decisions, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. The second, the other side of the coin here is the New Hampshire planning factors. We get New Hampshire specific planning factors from our friends at the Region 1 Federal Transit and Federal Highways Office. That's Lee Levine and Leah Sermon, our FTA and FTA, or Federal Highways folks. Again, there are a lot of them. I won't read them. They tend to add more every 2 years, so there's a lot to consider. But again, it's very inclusive of the planning work we do. Some of them are specific, like you can see 3/4 of the way down for the data collection for HPMS. That's Highway Performance Monitoring System. Those are the traffic counts we do. Other states and MPOs do it differently, so that's specific to us. So these are specific to the UPWP and the work we've put in. The UPWP is divided up into primarily the first 500 categories and the first 5 categories, and the 600 is a as kind of a standby category. In this past cycle, we got a grant to update the coordinated plan with Coast, their coordinated transit plan. So that was something that got fit into there as we went along. No major changes in the 100 category. This is for the administrative, bookkeeping, and so forth. We did hear that there will be a new invoicing process that we will all have to learn, which I'm sure we're all looking forward to with bated breath. But it just sort of aligns with how DOT does their federal dollar processing. So, it sounds like a terrible thing. 200, this is where all of our major documents live, like the TIP and Metro plan. The bicycle and pedestrian plan, we heard from DOT that they will be updating their statewide long-range plan, and we'll be a part of that. Planning environmental linkages, as you can imagine, touches on environmental stuff, like some of our climate change work gets done there. And then a couple of folks in the office are working on a corridor and congestion management planning effort. We are not required to do a congestion management plan like other larger regions that have a lot of congestion. But we're looking at, we're analyzing the major corridors like 125 and US 4 from a kind of what is going to be built and how will that affect traffic levels along those routes. So I put in a little sub bullet there with the new funds. Jen and I are still working on the details, but anticipating hiring a new transportation planner to work in tandem with myself. I get to do a lot of cool stuff and a lot of a wide variety of things. Sometimes it feels like I'm doing all of the things half as good when we have a whole ton of deadlines to do. So hoping to hire a new person to kind of work on the technical side of things, the project management and the document updates, and then release me to do more outreach and project development. So interfacing with municipalities and underrepresented groups that can't make it to a TAC meeting on a Friday morning or a policy meeting, but have important input in the process and perspectives and things we hadn't thought about. Another thought for the 200 category, we are anticipating hiring an engineering consultant like we did in this previous 10-year plan round. They would be reviewing projects and developing cost estimates for us. This past round, we had $50,000. We're anticipating having a bit more. That paid for 7 projects that we all reviewed. And so this is going to be a new step in our process, especially for the TAC policy, where I anticipate the major decision point of discussion will be earlier on when we're looking at the whole list of Metro Plan projects and deciding which ones go to the engineers to get that cost estimate. Because the cost estimates will be required for getting them into the 10-year plan, and the cost estimates do a lot if you're applying for grants. So that feels like the bottleneck where we're going to be, which projects do we pull from our pool of ready projects to get that professional review. So more to come on that. I already talked a little bit about this. This is our 300 category where we do the outreach and public involvement. Our TAC policy committees, the public participation plan, we are anticipating an update of that. Maybe not a full soup to nuts update, but a substantial one nonetheless. This is where I would be doing more outreach to communities and folks that aren't at the table here. A big one for me is freight providers, the folks driving the trucks and managing that New Hampshire North Coast. We're looking at an approach from the folks in Maine, in Portland, where they have a really strong immigrant community in Portland. So MPO staff went to that community and kind of found and developed champions as kind of a gatekeeper to that community, and got a lot of valuable information from folks that weren't able to come to their MPO meetings because they were working or didn't know they happened or couldn't make it for various reasons. So instead of hoping folks will give us information through surveys and TAC meetings, going to them. 400 category, this is our data collection analysis, the traffic counts we do, the bike ped counts. Steve and Mark and others did a lot of bike ped counting this past round. So we're kind of building that, and we're going to keep that rolling. RSMS is road safety management, road surface management system. So if you've worked with us, that's the pavement conditions and planning out years where paving and crack seal and stuff happen. Again, a plug to the annual data snapshot. A lot of work goes into that, and it's a pretty big resource. So if you haven't checked it out, it's on our website. And then this is where all of our GIS work happens. Last major category tends to be a catch-all, except for the transit. The local and regional assistance incorporates a whole wide range of things. We do all of the work for funding opportunities like CMAC that we're currently in the middle of. The transit work where I go to meetings and help with Coast. That's where this category is for. And then travel demand management. We are applying for a CMAC grant to kind of revitalize it's called a TMA, a transportation management area. If you remember Anne Rugg, she was a staff member at Coast and was instrumental in reaching out to primarily businesses and large employers to promote these alternative commuting kind of challenges and events. She was really good at making it fun and instigating friendly competition between businesses to see who could get the most number of their staff carpooling or biking or taking the bus or telecommuting. So her work finished in 2020. The pandemic kind of made things weird because a lot of people were telecommuting. So we're hoping we noticed a substantial drop in the number of people that kept doing that after Anne left. So we're hoping to hire a new person to do that. A lot of folks are still doing it just because they got used to it because we had Anne to help do that. So they just realized the benefit of it. It even had a guaranteed ride home program. So if you're participating in a challenge and your carpool driver had a daycare issue or something and you were stuck, there was a way to get home. So I already mentioned this, the coordinated plan update that got incorporated into the current UPWP, and there may be other ones that come up in the next 2-year contract. So again, this is kind of recapping. We would have myself working with a new person that we'd be hiring to kind of balance the day-to-day technical side of things. I don't know what their title is going to be yet, Jen, but I'm just kind of technical manager. I'm not sure what it would actually look like. But helping out on the minors, the document updates. We're hoping to, I'll say, modernize how we manage projects and present that information and kind of updating our database so that the projects flow really nicely. And then I would be out in the field generating those projects and kind of doing the general stuff with the planning factors, like how do we enhance tourism in this region? So that sort of thing. I think that was it. Blitz through that. Any questions on UPWP? For some reason, we are not required in under federal law to hold a public comment period for an over $1 million contract. But we tend to do that and make sure it's well published and advertised and so forth, because it's a lot of people hours and a lot of work and a lot of cool stuff.
That doesn't happen at the GNC level.
Well, I guess, I actually don't know if
I
those
don't
are
know
public
either.
meetings, if council, but, we're excited to get started on another 2 years and, a lot of cool stuff to do and, hopefully we get, there isn't a crush of deadlines at the end of that 2 years. Like this one. It's just the way the cookie crumbled this time. That was it for me.
I'm just looking to see.
I'm not seeing any.
Steve looks like he's gonna bust a cuss. Yes, no?
All right, I think that was it, for discussion items. Oh shoot, there was the build tracker you sent me, Jen. That was the other, if there isn't any other business, I had one more thing to kind of throw out there. Jen sent me a resource for, come on,
Colin, hold on, you have a hand?
okay.
Steve?
Colin, I just wanted to ask about the CMAQ process. So is a proper protocol that applicants should send you a full copy of the applications and supporting materials that we submitted? And then we'll wait to hear from you about the air quality analyses?
Thank you. Good question. If you are applying for CMAQ, it would be great to get that application when you send it to DOT. We can know who is actually applying and get started on those analyses because we have a pretty short window. I've looked ahead at the applications, the potential ones, and I think it's a doable lift. Since like UNH bus replacements are pretty clear, new bus replacing old bus, new emissions, old emissions, show the difference. But we will be getting started on those as soon as humanly possible. And yeah, so we'll be processing that. And Bill Watson, if you have something else to input here?
Yeah, thank you, Colin. Certainly, Steve, we don't want to hold any of the applicants back from sharing them with the MPOs of the RPCs. We would caution the RPCs from doing any air quality work. One of the commitments that we made was that we would sit down at the last TPC meeting. We discussed this with all the staff of all 9 planning commissions, that we would sit down with you and DES and others to make sure that we're all doing air quality analyses consistently.
Yeah.
So that you don't start in one direction and then we have to reverse you to go in a different direction and rework. We also want to ensure that, and Tom Jameson, I think, has already been identifying to people that he's going to pass those full applications on to the RPCs. We want to also ensure that what we pass along to you is complete. So there may be, I'm sure that UNH will do a good job. Steve is very familiar with what's been done over the years, but there are some newer applicants that may not have all the information that's needed for an application. So, certainly, again, from an application perspective, there's nothing wrong with the applicant sending the planning commissions a copy. Just understand that there may be a revised or an updated version that gets to the regional planning commissions, and just please don't get too far ahead on the air quality analyses if you're going to jump into it, because we don't want to create rework for anyone.
Thank you, Bill. Fully understood. For us, it's just a way of understanding what could potentially be in the queue and making sure that we're adequately reserving staff time to conduct those analyses when it is the proper time to do so.
Absolutely. I mean, and you saw the email from us yesterday. So for transparency to everyone else, tonight is the deadline for CMAQ. And the one thing that Tom Jameson asked everybody at the CMAQ workshop was, please don't wait until the last second to submit your application. Well, as of yesterday afternoon, we had 2 applications submitted, and we had over 70 letters of interest that had come into us. So today is going to be an overwhelming day, which is exactly what we didn't want. We all want to be able to plan for what the work effort is ahead of us. It's, here we are.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, totally understand. I mostly look ahead to make sure I'm not going to have to do any additional data collection in a pinch, or if there are intersection projects and we need new traffic counts or something like that, because that has been the butt in the past. And I'll bring plenty of questions to that TPC meeting, or the meeting on air quality analyses, specifically around the EV charging. I have some questions on how that's going to work as far as assumptions and things like that. So that'll be really valuable to do that. All right.
So where are we?
So
Community updates, is that where we are?
Yes.
Move us along.
Yeah, I will forward, Jen, I'll forward that bill tracking thing to people, since I didn't have a chance to really look at it. But it just looks like a good resource for the transportation or what other bills you're interested in that are in the kind of development stage at this point.
Yeah, and Colin, before you do that, I'll make sure you have like the route link to that. So just for everyone who's still online, New Hampshire Municipal Association just this year launched a new bill tracking platform that they're using, and it's really slick. So you can go in and subscribe to different topical areas of bills. They have a transportation topic, so you can try, and you can either get daily updates or weekly updates on where various bills are in the legislative process. So it's pretty handy, and they're rather inclusive in their list of bills that they track. So it makes it a lot easier for the rest of us to monitor. So we'll be sure to get you.
Community updates. That's it.
Right. So yeah, that leaves just a couple things left. Community updates. And then citizens forum, even though I don't see any people that aren't part of the TAC here. Anybody have any updates from their community?
I'll just say that on coast side, we've had a reduced service level due to shortage of CDL operators, and we have seen that turning around in the last couple months. We've gotten quite a few new operators that are working out great, and we on January 13th or 14th, not the Saturday, but next Saturday, we'll be again increasing our service level. So we've increased our service level, I think, 3 times in the last couple of months, and this several more runs coming back, more Saturday service returning, and this will probably be our service level till mid-May, when we hope to have another increase if things keep on this track. But it's real positive.
It's great.
Thanks, Mike. Donna?
Thank you. I was just going to say that Dover is having a public input session on our downtown pedestrian vehicular traffic plan on January 23rd at 6 p.m. So just to kind of throw that out there, that's where we are on the project that's looking at turning downtown Dover into two-way traffic and other improvements.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right, hearing none. We can move on to number 6.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn,
Second.
and we have a second. And I'm going to vote yes. Bruce Woodruff.
Vote for your feet, or vote with your feet. As the writing says.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, no, we don't need to vote on that. Thank you all for being here. I know it's January and questionable weather and sickness. So thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.